Today is a gray day outside. I may feel a little gray, but I use it, and it's part of my being here. And you're a very attractive lady, and I'm talking to you.
In 1985, a mysterious box arrived at Anthony Quinn's house. Inside were memories so painful he couldn't open it for days. This box would lead him to confess everything. The scadalous affair where he dated a mother and daughter at the same time, the children he kept hidden, and a tragedy that haunted him for 60 years. From winning 2 Oscars to losing a child, this is the story Hollywood tried to bury. Anthony Quinn was born on April 21, 1915, in Chihuahua, Mexico, during a time of war and chaos. When Anthony was just a baby, his family had to escape from danger. His mother hid him in a coal wagon as they fled to El Paso, Texas, running from federal troops. This dramatic escape stayed in his story forever, almost like the roles he would play later in life. When Anthony was 6 years old, his family moved to California because they needed work. At first, they worked as farm laborers, picking crops to make ends meet. Later, they settled in East Los Angeles, living in areas like Boyle Heights and Echo Park. These neighborhoods were full of people from different cultures, and Anthony learned how to get along with everyone. Things took a sad turn when Anthony was just 9 years old. His father, Frank Quinn, died in a car accident near their home. It was a huge loss for the family. Without his father, Anthony felt he had to take care of everyone: his mother, his younger sister Stella, and even his grandmother. Life became even harder. Before his father's death, they had barely been earning enough to survive. Now, Anthony had to step in and do whatever he could to help. By the time he was a teenager, Anthony had done many jobs just to keep his family afloat. He worked as a farm hand, a taxi driver, and even learned to play the saxophone so he could start a small band. For a while, he was a professional boxer and won 16 fights in a row before finally losing. He also joined a church band led by a famous preacher, Aimee Semple McPherson. During this time, he became a preacher himself, speaking to people in Los Angeles' Mexican neighborhoods. Even with so much going on, Anthony didn't stop trying to learn. He set himself a goal to read a new book, listen to a piece of music, and study art every week. And his hard work paid off. While still in high school, he entered a contest with an architectural design and won. His prize was a chance to study under Frank Lloyd Wright, one of the most famous architects ever. Working with Wright was an eye-opening experience. Wright taught him to think beyond buildings and focus on the human spirit. This idea stayed with Anthony and influenced how he approached both art and acting later in life. Wright also encouraged him to take acting lessons to improve his speech, a suggestion that would change everything. While taking acting lessons, Anthony worked hard to make ends meet. He even cleaned buildings as a janitor to pay for his classes. Then, one lucky break changed his life. Another student got sick and couldn't perform in a school play, so Anthony stepped in. His performance was so good that Hollywood scouts noticed him. Soon after, he landed his first role in a movie called Parole in 1936. It was a small part, but it was the start of something big. At first, Anthony faced a lot of challenges. Hollywood often cast him as villains or in ethnic roles because of his background. He played characters like a Native American in The Plainsman, a gangster in Dangerous to Know, and even an Arab chieftain in Road to Morocco. While these roles showed his range, they also limited him. By 1947, after acting in over 50 films, he still hadn't become a major star. Frustrated, he decided to leave Paramount Studios and return to acting on stage. This was a brave move, but it paid off. Anthony got a big break when he played Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire on stage. He even replaced Marlon Brando in the role, which was a huge deal. His performance wowed audiences and critics. It proved he could handle deep, complicated characters and opened new doors for him. His big moment came in 1952 with Viva Zapata, where he played Eufemio Zapata alongside Marlon Brando. It was a small role. He was on screen for just 8 minutes, but he made every second count. His performance was so powerful that it earned him an Academy Award, making him the first Mexican-American actor to win one. This was a huge step forward for someone who had spent years stuck in small roles as villains or stereotypes. Winning that Oscar showed Hollywood that Quinn was more than a supporting player. Just a few years later, in 1956, Quinn won his second Oscar for Lust for Life. This time, he played the artist Paul Gauguin. Again, he wasn't on screen for long, but he made a huge impact. Sharing scenes with Kirk Douglas, who played Vincent van Gogh, Quinn stole the spotlight. He showed Gauguin as bold and full of himself, but also human and understanding. In one scene, he tries to calm Van Gogh during a heated moment, balancing tension and friendship perfectly. It's rare for an actor to shine so brightly with so little screen time, but Quinn did it twice, and Hollywood couldn't ignore him anymore. As Quinn's reputation grew, he didn't stick to Hollywood. In the late 1950s, he moved to Rome and became a star in European films. He worked with famous directors like Federico Fellini and took on roles that showed his range. In La Strada, he played Zampano, a rough and heartless strongman. His performance was so convincing that many people thought he was Italian. He also appeared in French films like The Hunchback of Notre Dame and became known as a global star. Quinn's ability to work across cultures and languages made him one of the most versatile actors of his time. But the role that truly defined Quinn's career came in 1964 with Zorba the Greek. Playing Alexis Zorba, Quinn brought the character to life in a way no one else could. Zorba was full of energy, passion, and love for life, and Quinn made him unforgettable. The film's dance scene, where Zorba performs the sirtaki on the beach, became legendary. People all over the world connected with the character, and Quinn became almost inseparable from Zorba. The role earned him another Oscar nomination and later inspired a Broadway version of the story, where Quinn played Zorba again, even in his 60s. Then, at the height of his career, Anthony Quinn decided to write an autobiography that would share the deeply personal sides of his life. In October 1972, he published The Original Sin, a Self-Portrait. It wasn't like most Hollywood memoirs. Instead of focusing on fame and success, he opened up about his struggles, mistakes, and pain. At the time, his personal life was complicated. He was married to Catherine DeMille, but in a relationship with Jolanda Adalori. In 1963, Jolanda gave birth to his son Francesco, and Quinn decided to publicly acknowledge him. Writing the book was Quinn's way of facing his truth. The title, The Original Sin, came from what he believed was his biggest weakness, his struggle to accept love. This became the main theme of his story. One of the most tragic moments in Quinn's life was losing his young son, Christopher. In 1941, Christopher drowned in a swimming pool when he was just 2 years old. At the time, Quinn was starting to make his way in Hollywood, but this loss changed him forever. Later, he said, "There is no greater pain in the world than losing a child." In his book, he talked about how the loss shaped him and the way he tried to be a father. However, it was his second biography that shocked everyone. Its story began in 1985, when Quinn received an unexpected package at his villa in Italy. It came from Catherine DeMille, his first wife, whom he had divorced 20 years earlier after nearly 3 decades of marriage. Inside the box were personal keepsakes from their life together. memories of their early years and their 5 children. But for Quinn, these weren't just old things. They brought back guilt and regret, especially over the pain he caused through his many affairs. One memory hit him the hardest: their first child, Christopher, who had tragically drowned at just 2 years old in 1941. Instead of opening the box right away, Quinn avoided it. It felt too heavy, too painful. Instead, he grabbed his bicycle and went for a ride through Rome. That ride became more than just a way to clear his head. It turned into a journey of reflection as he thought about his life, his mistakes, and the people he had hurt. Years later, this simple ride inspired the way he wrote his autobiography, One Man Tango. When Quinn finally published the book in 1995, at the age of 80, it was unlike any autobiography people had read before. He used his bike ride through Rome as the structure for the book, with every turn and memory tied to a part of his life. For him, the ride symbolized life itself, with its struggles, its exciting moments, and its unexpected twists. In the book, he opened up about everything: his marriages, his 13 children, including 4 born outside of marriage, and his many love affairs. He admitted to having affairs with several famous actresses, including Carole Lombard, Rita Hayworth, and Ingrid Bergman. His relationship with Carole Lombard had an awkward start. When they planned their first date, Quinn didn't show up because he didn't have anything nice to wear. Despite this rocky beginning, the two grew close, keeping their romance a secret from the public. Later, while filming Blood and Sand, Quinn fell for Rita Hayworth. Their connection was hard to miss, and it caused tension on set, but nothing compared to the scandal that came next. During the filming of The Visit, Quinn started an affair with Ingrid Bergman. That alone would have been big news, but then he also began seeing her daughter, Pia Lindstrom, at the same time. This created a strange and uncomfortable situation, where both mother and daughter were competing for his attention. The affair shocked Hollywood and became one of the most talked-about stories of the time. But Quinn didn't just have affairs with actresses. He was involved with costume designers, producers, and women from all over the world. Writing the book wasn't just about sharing his story. It was about freeing himself. He admitted that being so honest helped him let go of years of guilt. "I wanted to tell the truth so I could breathe easier," he said. "I wanted people to accept me as I am." But the truth came at a cost. His second wife, Jolanda, couldn't handle the revelations in the book and decided to leave him. Some of his children were also upset, feeling he had shared too much about their private lives. But Quinn stood by his decision. "How could I keep carrying these secrets?" he said. "Would they rather I suffer in silence?" Now, if we talk about Quinn's marriage life, it wasn't too good. His first marriage was to Catherine DeMille, the adopted daughter of the famous director Cecil B. DeMille. They married in 1937, and it seemed like a perfect Hollywood love story. But their life together was marked by heartbreak. They had 5 children, but in 1941, their firstborn son, Christopher, drowned in a lily pond at W.C. Fields' home. Despite this tragedy, they continued their marriage and welcomed 3 more children: Catalina, Duncan, and Valentina. However, their relationship was far from perfect. Catherine stayed with him for 28 years, but in 1964, Quinn filed for divorce, saying they were no longer compatible. Catherine's brother later said she still loved him deeply, even though he treated her unfairly. Not long after his first marriage ended, Quinn married Jolanda Adolori, an Italian costume designer, in 1966. Their relationship had already started while he was still married to Catherine. In fact, their first son, Francesco, was born in 1963, 3 years before they tied the knot. Quinn and Yolanda had 2 more sons, Danny and Lorenzo, but their marriage was not peaceful either. Quinn continued to have affairs, and during the 1970s, he had 2 more children with another woman, Friedel Dunbar. Yolanda stayed with him for many years, but by 1997, their marriage had fallen apart. The divorce was messy, with their son Danny accusing Quinn of being abusive. While Danny testified in court, Quinn dismissed the claims, even drawing pictures of an angry woman in the courtroom. He later suggested his son needed help, adding more drama to the already strained family situation. By the end of 1997, Quinn married again, this time to Catherine Benvin, his former secretary. He was 82, and she was 35, making their 47-year age gap the subject of gossip. Their relationship had started before his second divorce, and they already had 2 children, Antonia and Ryan. The marriage caused a stir, but Quinn didn't seem to care about the opinions of others. They stayed together until his death in 2001. Apart from family drama, Quinn loved art long before he ever became an actor. He started painting and sculpting when he was just 6 years old, and his talent stood out right away. As a teenager in California, he won art competitions, including one where he made a plaster bust of Abraham Lincoln. What's amazing is that he never really went to art school. He only took a few classes later in Chicago, but everything else he learned on his own. Over his lifetime, he created more than 3,000 pieces of art. He didn't need fancy supplies. He would sketch on hotel notepads or even menus if that's all he had. He worked with materials like bronze, steel, marble, and even stones or wood he found while filming movies in places like North Africa and the Middle East. In the 1980s, something unexpected happened. People visiting his home started asking to buy the decorations he had made. That led to his first art exhibition, which completely sold out in Honolulu. His art wasn't just a side hobby, it became famous around the world. His work was shown in museums and galleries, like the National Hellenic Museum, where an exhibition called Transcending Boundaries featured over 80 of his pieces. At his home in Bristol, he kept thousands of his drawings, sculptures, and paintings. Some of his work became part of permanent collections, like the Great Spirit at the Smithsonian and his tribal series at the Autry Museum. Quinn's style was unique. He was inspired by Cubism, African art, and modern sculptors like Henry Moore. One of his favorite projects was a traveling exhibition that showed his art across the US and Europe. Just before he passed away, he completed a series of numbered prints, leaving a final artistic mark. Quinn was also a writer who told the story of his amazing life in 2 memoirs. His first book, The Original Sin, came out in 1972, and his second, One Man Tango, was published in 1997. He also wrote about his art in Anthony Quinn's Eye, A Lifetime of Creating and Collecting Art. This book not only showcased his work, but also the art he collected. For Quinn, art wasn't just something he did, it was part of who he was. He once said, "Art is my ethnicity," showing how deeply his Mexican and Irish roots inspired his work. Anthony Quinn wasn't just a Hollywood star, he was also a passionate activist who fought against discrimination and stood up for the rights of minorities. Having experienced prejudice himself growing up as a Mexican-American in Los Angeles, Quinn knew firsthand how hurtful and unfair it was to be treated differently because of your race or ethnicity. One way Quinn made a real difference was by supporting the Spanish-speaking People's Congress, a group dedicated to advocating for Latino rights. He helped them raise money and spread their message far and wide. Quinn also pitched in to help raise funds for the legal defense of some Mexican-American teenagers who were unfairly accused of murder in the infamous Sleepy Lagoon trial. He knew they deserved a fair chance to prove their innocence. Even when Quinn was far from home, he never forgot about the struggle for equality. While hanging out in Paris with some other famous Americans, he helped write a petition to get people excited about joining the 1963 March on Washington. They published that petition in a bunch of big-name magazines, hoping it would rally support from Americans abroad who believed in the cause. Native Americans had a friend in Quinn, too. In 1969, he visited some Native American college students who were occupying Alcatraz Island, protesting to demand fairer treatment from the government. Quinn listened to their concerns and promised to help however he could. He also spoke up for Hispanic Americans at a big conference in 1970, and even narrated a documentary film the next year that exposed the job discrimination they faced. Throughout his life, Quinn stood shoulder to shoulder with people fighting for their rights, like his good pal Cesar Chavez, who led the United Farm Workers. Quinn knew that his fame gave him a powerful platform to shine a light on injustice and make the world a little bit better for everyone. For him, that was what being a star was all about, using his voice to help those who didn't always get heard. Anthony Quinn was a busy man back in the 1960s. He was working in movies, but also wanted to be a big star on Broadway. In 1960, he got his chance. He was in a play called Becket with another famous actor, Laurence Olivier. In the play, Quinn played a king named Henry II. He did such a good job that he almost won a big award called a Tony. The play did win the award for Best Play, though. Now, there's a funny story that some people tell. They say that during the play, Quinn and Olivier switched parts. They say Quinn played Becket, and Olivier played the king. But that's not really what happened. See, Quinn had to leave the play to go make a movie. He never even got to play Becket. The guy in charge of the play, named Peter Glenville, had an idea. He said, "Hey, let's take this play on the road. Olivier can be the king." Olivier liked that idea. So they got another actor named Arthur Kennedy to play Becket, and they did a tour. As the 1960s were ending, Quinn made a big decision. He decided to let himself look older and become a character actor. That means he started playing roles that were less about being handsome and more about being interesting. His hair turned gray. His face started looking a bit rougher. He even gained some weight. Quinn played some really cool parts around this time. In a movie called The Guns of Navarone, he was a tough guy fighting against the bad guys in Greece. In another movie, Requiem for a Heavyweight, he played a boxer who was getting too old to fight. And in a big famous movie called Lawrence of Arabia, he played a strong leader of a group of people called the Bedouins. That movie won a bunch of big awards called Oscars and Golden Globes. Quinn was nominated for an award for his acting in it too. But Quinn wasn't done yet. In 1961, he played the main part in a movie called Barabbas. It was based on a book by a man named Per Lagerkvist. The next year, Quinn went back to Broadway. He was in a play called Chin Chin and played a character named Cesario Grimaldi. The play was so good that it was nominated for a Tony Award. In 1970, he played a cool college professor who was all about peace and love in a movie called RPM. He was in it with a lady named Anne Margaret. That same year, he was also in a movie called A Walk in the Spring Rain. It was set in the mountains, and he played a guy who lived out in the woods. The really special thing about this movie was that it was the first time in 20 years that a famous actress named Ingrid Bergman had made a movie in America. The next year, in 1971, Quinn was in a TV movie called The City, where he played the mayor. People liked it so much that he got his own TV show after that, called The Man in the City. But after that, he didn't do too much more TV. He was in a really big TV show called Jesus of Nazareth, though. In 1972, Quinn was in a movie called Across 110th Street with another actor named Yaphet Kotto. It was a movie about cops and robbers in Harlem, which is a neighborhood in New York City. Quinn played a mean old police captain who didn't like black people very much. Kotto played a younger, smarter cop who had gone to college. A few years later, in 1976, Quinn was in a really important movie called Muhammad, Messenger of God, or sometimes people call it The Message. It was all about how the religion of Islam started. Quinn played a guy named Hamza, who was Muhammad's uncle. People really looked up to Hamza. Then, in 1981, Quinn played a real guy from history named Omar Mukhtar in a movie called Lion of the Desert. Omar Mukhtar was a leader of the Bedouin people, and he fought against the Italian army in the deserts of a country called Libya. The Italians were trying to take over, but Omar Mukhtar fought back. In 1979, Quinn made a movie called The Passage. It was about a shepherd from a place called Basque during World War II. He had to help a scientist and his family get across some mountains called the Pyrenees while the Nazis were chasing them. It was really exciting and also had some other big stars like James Mason and Malcolm McDowell. Anthony Quinn's career kept rolling along, even as he got older. In the early 1980s, he decided to take another shot at playing Zorba, a role he had made famous in the movies, but this time it was on stage in a musical. Quinn sang and danced his way through 362 shows of Zorba on Broadway and in Washington, D.C. And guess what? Remember Lila Kudrova, the lady who played Madame Hortense in the movie with Quinn? She was right there with him again in the musical. As the years went by, Quinn slowed down a bit, but he never really stopped working. In 1990, he was in a TV movie called The Old Man and the Sea, which was based on a famous book by Ernest Hemingway. He also popped up in a bunch of other movies throughout the 90s like Revenge, Jungle Fever, Only the Lonely, Last Action Hero, A Walk in the Clouds, and Seven Servants. But Quinn wasn't just in regular movies. He also played Zeus, the big boss of all the Greek gods, in 5 TV movies about the adventures of Hercules. These movies had really cool names like Hercules and the Amazon Women, Hercules and the Lost Kingdom, Hercules and the Circle of Fire, Hercules in the Underworld, and Hercules in the Maze of the Minotaur. Can you imagine being Zeus 5 times? That's pretty impressive. In 1995, Quinn acted in his final movie where he was the main star. It was called Seven Servants and was made by a director named Dariush Shokov. Even as his health declined, he showed remarkable dedication to his craft, reflecting his belief, "I can't retire. I mean, I started working when I was a year and a half old, and I worked all my life." Quinn's death on June 3, 2001, at age 86, marked the end of a legendary Hollywood career. He passed away in a Boston hospital due to respiratory failure, complicated by pneumonia and throat cancer. In his final years, he lived peacefully in Bristol, Rhode Island, focusing on his art and spending time with his family. The news of his passing spread around the world, with countless tributes celebrating a man who had brought to life everything from fiery revolutionaries to wise philosophers. Quinn's influence on cinema is undeniable. He was the first Mexican-American to win an Academy Award, opening doors for Latino actors in Hollywood. His portrayal of Zorba the Greek became so iconic that it's now a teaching reference in Greek schools, with his performance considered the definitive interpretation of the character. Beyond acting, his love for art and creativity endured. The Anthony Quinn Foundation, founded by his widow Kathy in 2007, continues his legacy by supporting arts education for young people. Inspired by his own childhood experiences as a painter and sculptor, the foundation reflects the creative spirit that defined his life. Even after his death, Quinn's impact remains powerful. His artwork is exhibited worldwide, and his performances in over 160 films continue to captivate audiences. From his groundbreaking achievements in Hollywood to his lasting contributions to art, Anthony Quinn's life stands as a testament to his extraordinary talent, resilience, and passion.